Okay, so we're looking back from 1982 all the way to 2020. And so we're going to look at some data. We're going to look at, common reasons why sea turtles strand in our area and what we do to help rehabilitate them. All right. So the Amos Rehabilitation Keep is a wildlife rehab facility. We rescue, rehabilitate, and release sea turtles, marine birds, and raptors. We deal with about 1,500 patients per year, and we're located on the campus. Yep. Thought maybe something was going on, but we're located on the campus of the University of Texas Marine Science Institute in Port Aransas, Texas. This is our facility, and we're very lucky to be located here because it is a very strategic location on Mustang Island, and it's very close to the Aransas Pass ship channel and the jetties, which we get a lot of turtles that strand in this area. So we're lucky to be here. All right. This is a map of, each one of those dots represents a turtle. So the yellow star is the arc, and we have a pretty large response area. So really from south of Surfside Beach all the way to the North Packery Channel jetties. So quite a large area. That's about 150 miles. So for sea turtles. NOAA Galveston, they used to have a facility in Galveston, and now Texas A&M does. So we work with them, and they're kind of up and coming. So we're hoping that some of those northern turtles might get some help from them. But currently we work very closely with Padre Island National Seashore, Texas Parks and Wildlife, a lot of different agencies on the southern end, especially during something called cold stunning, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So while we don't normally respond to some of those southern turtles, we still, when they find a turtle that's injured and alive that needs some help, they contact us, and we're there to help in that rehabilitation process. So, all right. So we have in this graph, it's kind of a lot of information, but we have over the years dealt with over 8,000 sea turtles that we've documented. So the blue bars in this graph represent the live turtles that we've seen, and the orange bars represent the dead turtles. Some things that I'd like to point out here, that dead turtles, stranded turtles, they do provide us with a lot of data. And so I'm going to show you some of that data that we've collected from both live and dead turtles. So there's a lot of valuable data there. And our release line is usually pretty tied into how many live turtles we find. So there are some years where we have a lot more live than dead, and so obviously we'd have a higher release rate there. So something to keep in mind on that yellow bar. We've had, like I said, a total of over 8,200 sea turtles. Of those, just over 4,500, almost 4,600 were alive. That's about 55% of the turtles we've seen have been live rehab turtles. Some things to point out. So a lot has changed over the years, and in 1982, we dealt with 8 stranded sea turtles. And so, moving forward to 2019, you can see that That number, 2018, 2019, both much, much higher. You know, almost 800 turtles there that we were able to document. Big changes for our stranding numbers over the years. I also want to point out that 2020, we saw this sort of drop in strandings with only about 350. And so we're going to talk more as this presentation continues on why some of this might be, okay? So here in the Gulf of Mexico, we have 5 species of sea turtles that are most commonly found. And I say most commonly because we're going to talk about a 6th species that is starting to be more frequent in the Gulf of Mexico and was recently found here on Mustang Island. So the green sea turtle, definitely our most common species of sea turtle. They're the sea turtles that you see at the jetties eating algae off of the rocks. They're herbivorous, mostly. At adulthood, they're strictly herbivorous, eating algae and seagrass, which is why they're so attracted to our area, because our estuaries have lots of seagrass, which is great. They are definitely, their numbers are increasing in our area. We're going to see that for sure. And also nesting is increasing. So we're starting to see more adults in the area, which is a good sign. We had our first nest on Mustang Island in 2020. So, you know, definitely some positives for this species. Here's the Kemp's Ridley. They are the rarest of all the sea turtles. They're also the smallest, and you know, we work very closely with them during nesting season. We protect and document nests for them. They utilize our Mustang Island, San Jose Island on Texas coast heavily for nesting, and a common stranded patient as well. Loggerhead sea turtles, they're larger than Kemp's for sure, but smaller than greens. They get to be about 250 pounds. And they're carnivores. They eat crabs, bivalves, snails, things like that, and because of those strong jaws. So
are these sea turtles?
So we'll talk a little more about you know, about that species and some trends for them too. All right, Hawksbill sea turtles is something is a species that we see here. Definitely less common than the other 3, but we still do see them. And some years are greater than others, and we'll see that in the coming graphs. Their preferred food is sea sponges, but they can be pretty opportunistic, and sometimes they're omnivorous. They can also eat algae too. And then the leatherback, the largest of all of the sea turtles, they get to be about 1,000 pounds. They're really unique animals. They grow faster than the hard-shell turtles, which is pretty interesting. They migrate further north. They dive deeper than other species, and all because of the way that they're adapted. That's different than the hard-shell turtles. So remember I said there was a new turtle kind of on the scene, and that would be the olive ridley turtle. Not my photo, I stole it. But olive ridleys, we had one in 2019 that washed ashore. Unfortunately, it was dead, and it was the first one ever documented in Texas. But we're starting to see them more in the Gulf of Mexico. They're the most common species of sea turtle, so we imagine that we could potentially start to see more. So definitely something to look out for. When we first got this turtle, we didn't know what it was. We thought it might have been a hybrid. So we had to do some genetics testing to nail down that species, which is kind of cool. All right, some species trends. So there's kind of a lot going on in this graph, and I hope I don't, you know, totally confuse you. So when you're looking at it, keep in mind that these are percentages of each species found. So there's lots of interesting points that we can bring about from this graph. So lots of large changes of species distribution from 1982 until now. But remember, in 1982, we only had 8 turtles that we documented, and whereas in 2019, we had almost 800, same thing with 2018, 2020, about 350. So obviously that will kind of skew those percentages a lot. But one thing to definitely keep an eye on is that bottom blue kind of color is the green sea turtle. And you can see that that percentage has steadily and dramatically risen over the years. So that's a big part of what our strandings make up of. It's a big part of the reasons that we're seeing these increases in stranding numbers is because of the increases in green sea turtles. So let's see, over the years, we've found almost over 5,200 green sea turtles and documented them. We've also loggerheads, about 1,500 loggerheads. And for Kim Stridley's about 1,000. Those numbers have remained fairly consistent over the years, but we do usually find more dead loggerheads each year than live. And that probably has everything to do with illegal longlining and shrimping interactions, especially in the early 90s or before turtle excluder devices were heavily used. So let's see, hawksbills, we've documented 360 or so. Hawksbills were very common in the 90s. We were finding them washing ashore entangled in onion sacks from the shrimping industry. We don't find that as often, but we do usually find them live. And mostly we find post-hatchling. So just past that hatchling stage, but still very young. So within the first year of their life. It's definitely less common to see dead hawksbills, as I said. Leatherbacks. Over the years, that number has declined. That we've seen, that's the little yellow bar. So yeah, we haven't really seen as many leatherbacks in recent years, especially in the past 10 years. We've only had 2 alive at the Ark, one in 2006 and one in 2020. So the one in 2020, we estimated it to be about 600 pounds. It was hit by a boat, and unfortunately, our veterinarians, they deemed that the most humane treatment for it was euthanasia. You know, really beautiful animal, and it was definitely a exciting and challenging day for sure. So, and then one olive. Oh, 79 unknown turtles. Sorry, I didn't mean to miss those guys. So sometimes we find turtles that a member of the public finds the turtle and they set it loose without ever taking a photo, but then they contact us afterwards like, hey, I found this turtle. and we never saw the species, so it goes on unidentified, but we want to document it. So that's sometimes what the unknowns are, or we'll just find one rib bone and we can't quite ID exactly what species. That might go under an unknown. So still fairly low numbers compared to the rest, but you know, around 80 for the past almost 40 years. So and then the one olive ridley. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what brings these turtles in and how we treat it. So one of the big ways to come and visit the Ark as a turtle is hypothermic cold stunning. So hypothermic cold stunning, all sea turtles are ectothermic, which means that they cannot regulate their body temperature. So their environment dictates what their temperature is. So if water temperatures drop below 50 degrees, then these turtles can become cold stunned. They become lethargic and they float to the surface, where they are vulnerable to things like boat strikes and drowning and predation, lots of other issues. This is usually seen in our shallow bays and estuaries because that water is shallow, so it's easier for those huge fluctuations in temperature. So in 2018, if you guys remember, that was the year we saw around 800 turtles. We had over 3,600 sea turtles that stranded on the Texas coast. So it was a really crazy year that we, you know, required all hands on deck. Every turtle was assessed by ARC staff and vets, and they all received pretty specialized treatment. So we're going to talk about numbers and that kind of treatment. So here is our graph for you know, what we've seen over the years. We've had almost 2,100 sea turtles that we've documented at the Ark as cold stun, and most of those were alive, with 1,900 treated at the Ark alive. So, and a big part of that is because all along the Texas coast, people are looking for these turtles, especially at Padre Island National Seashore in the Laguna Madre. And when they find the turtles, then they bring them to rehab facilities or contact us, and we work on transporting them to us. So that definitely plays a part in how many live turtles we're seeing. So some things to point out on the graph. Cold stun numbers are rising, and a big part of that is because green sea turtle numbers are rising. Those are the sea turtles that we most commonly see stranded because of cold stunning, because they're in the bays and the estuaries eating that seagrass. We do get a few kimps and loggerheads, but it's pretty rare. So we predict that these numbers are going to continue to rise, and we're going to see large years when we see those weird sudden drops in weather, you know, when we have those cold snaps, you know, Texas winters, really. I also want to point out that there was very minimal cold stunning in 2019 and 2020. So remember, 2019, we had that still a very large amount of stranded turtles. So something else is going on. We're going to look more at that. All right, how do we treat it? So we treat cold stunning by gradually warming the sea turtles. We don't just put them in front of a heater. It has to be slow, or you can send them into shock, which is not good, obviously. So we do a lot of diagnostics on all of our turtles: blood work, weight checks, radiographs, x-rays. So we give fluid therapy for a lot of these turtles because they come in usually pretty dehydrated, and they'll have low blood sugar. So we want to do a little bit of blood work, test their blood sugars, and then give them the appropriate fluids that match what they need to help raise their blood glucose levels. This year, we had 20 cold stun Ridleys. That's what you can see in these photos that were flown into Texas from Cape Cod, Massachusetts area. So while we don't get a lot of Ridleys that cold stun, in that area they do. They get a lot because those juvenile chimps are migrating further and further north to utilize food sources, and they get stuck up there in the cold and need help. So this year, Cape Cod kind of reached out to Texas and said, hey, we need some help. We're seeing crazy numbers. And so 120 of them were sent to Texas, and we received 20 of them. Many of them were thin, debilitated, they had pneumonia and eye injuries. We're still treating a lot of them, and we hope to release them this spring. So we're excited about that. But some common issues that we see in these cold stun turtles, it's not just cold stunning. Sometimes you have to treat multiple things. We see a lot of boat strikes. We see pneumonia, as I said, debilitation. That usually happens that first cold stunning when the turtles are really weaker turtles are easier to cold stun. So we're going to see more debilitated turtles in that first cold snap of the season. They can also get entangled, fibropoplatosis, which we'll talk about later, and eye injuries because they're out of the water, they're floated onto land, and they're dehydrating. So all of that takes some time and care to fix. All right, another big reason for turtles to strand in our area, unfortunately, is entanglement. We see this way too commonly. If I had one wish, it would to be not to see this ever, but I don't think it's going to happen yet. So we see a lot of severe injuries when they are alive, where there's circulation issues with their flippers, like that picture in the top right hand where the flipper is very swollen, and that's due to a loss of blood circulation. We also see a lot of drowning, so what we find them usually dead near the jetties, and they've drowned. We get puncture and ingestion wounds with hooks. Sometimes they ingest the fishing line, which can cause plication of the intestines, where their intestines will become accordion-like, or it will create a hole in their intestines and lead to sepsis. So definitely lots of issues there, and can be very difficult. So so the numbers, they are on the rise, unfortunately, and we see these huge raises in entanglement, especially 2019. 2020, we only had 350 turtles, but still higher than 2018 and 2017. So a lot of entanglement in our area, unfortunately. A lot of these turtles will end up losing their flippers, but on average, they spend 56 days in rehab. So may not seem like a lot, but I went ahead and I looked at it just a little closer, and I added up all the time spent rehabbing turtles that have been entangled, and it was over 21,000 days spent for turtles in rehab. That's 59 years, over 59 years. So it's really sad, and something that we can, as humans, work to make better by disposing of our fishing line just, more responsibly. So 840 turtles that we've seen this way. And that, does include both live and dead. So, all right, how do we treat it? So we have some kind of cool ways to treat it that we've recently started using. We started using medicinal leeches to help with that swelling that you saw in that one picture. And so we'll use these leeches to help reduce the swelling, as well as warm honey massages. Honey is antifungal, antibacterial, and so we use that a lot in a lot of injuries. It doesn't gunk up the water, and it's safe for the turtles and safe for us too, which is really cool. We also have to sometimes do surgery. We use x-rays to look at these turtles to see if a turtle is entangled. There is a high chance that they might have also ingested a hook. So we want to look closer at that. We use a cold laser sometimes to reduce that swelling. The cold laser is a machine that speeds up the healing process. It gets your cells firing at faster rates, which is pretty cool. Antibiotics, fluids, and sometimes pain medication. All right. So debilitation is something that we also see a lot of. What is a debilitated turtle? It's a turtle that's anemic, weak, lethargic. Sometimes they have pneumonia. They can be emaciated, anorexic, and they're usually covered in epibiota because they've been floating at the surface for a really long time. So barnacles and other critters will start growing on their shell. The treatment is difficult for debilitation because usually they're so far, they're really in bad shape that it's a difficult process. So we start with vitamins, antibiotics, sometimes nebulization. Maybe some of you have had that. It's a human treatment that we use for turtles for breathing. So we'll put the turtles in a box, and we give them the nebulization treatment that has antibiotics or antifungals, depending on the issues, and they breathe it in, and they can get into their lungs. It helps treat pneumonia. But one of the biggest things we do is try to get them to eat, and it sounds so easy, and I wish it was. But our volunteers and our staff spend a lot of time working on getting them to eat. So we offer lots of different types of foods. Some turtles really love one type of fish, some turtles like shrimp, so we offer a wide variety and see what they go for and record it. And then, and constantly monitor their weight as well. And so it can change too. One day they might like anchovies, and the next day they're not feeling it. So it can be a trying process to get these turtles to eat. And so in this photo, our veterinarian is placing a feeding tube in a turtle that we weren't able to get to eat, and it gotten to the point where it was critical to get some nutrients into them. So it's sort of a last resort, and we definitely don't love doing that, but some turtles, they're just stubborn and we have to. So freshwater bath, we use a lot to get off the epibiota. We don't want to just start ripping it off. We want it to come off easily. So the freshwater usually kills off acorn barnacles and other things, and we're able to remove it a little more gently. And fluids, everybody's going to get some fluids. So this is a debilitated hawksbill. Remember, you can really see that beak in this photo, which is what gives them their name, hawksbill. So over the years, we've had almost 800 debilitated turtles that have come into the ark, and it's a difficult process for sure, and those numbers are still rising. 2020 saw just as many as 2019, and 2019 had a lot more turtle strands. So we see a lot of debilitation. Boat-related injuries. So boat-related injuries are some of the most difficult. When we get them alive, it is a very difficult process. But as you can see in this graph, which the live is the blue and the orange is the dead turtles, in this graph, we see a lot more dead boat strike turtles than we do live, unfortunately. But when we do see them live, we have a pretty low success rate because the injuries are really severe, and it's difficult to bring them back. And when we are able to, sometimes we're still not able to release them. Like this turtle in this photo, it has buoyancy issues where air has been trapped into its body cavity. And so this turtle is one of our educational ambassadors that we use to teach people about green sea turtles and boat strikes. But that happens all too frequently. So over the years, about 730 boat strike turtles, both alive and dead. That's what this number correlates to. So how are we treating it? We want to get x-rays. We want to see what's going on under the hood. Sometimes that requires surgery. We also use kind of some cool techniques, vacuum bandaging, to where we have this machine that you set up. You want to keep water out of these turtles and, you know, whatever's in the water out. So that can be tricky, but they do better. They heal better in water. So sometimes we'll use vacuum bandaging to keep the water out and make a watertight seal. Also, we've tried other watertight bandaging. Sometimes with sea turtle rehab, it does feel a little bit like crafting, but you find ways to help these turtles. And speaking of crafting, turtle rehab can be really tricky on how to repair injuries. So with this turtle in this photo, we had to get creative. So you can see the top photo, you know, he had this boat strike injury right on the edge of the carapace, right next to the bone. And so it's a really difficult situation because you have nowhere to tie in on sutures. And so our veterinarian used some brawl hooks to tie into, and we cemented those down, tied into them, and started that healing process. It seemed to have worked, and when we released the turtle, it had healed up really nicely. So sometimes with these turtles, it is a lot of you know, getting creative. We also use things like honey, cold laser, a lot of debridement, you know, getting rid of the tissue that is necrotic, dying, antibiotics, fluids, everyone gets fluids, helps everything, and pain medication. Sometimes we'll use weight therapy for those turtles that have buoyancy issues to help to see if we can get those buoyancy issues worked out. So definitely still very difficult to win on these, but we always try. Fibropoplatosis. So fibropoplatosis, or FP, is a herpes virus. It creates tumors on the outside of these turtles' bodies and on the inside as well, which is difficult because you can't see them and they don't always show up on x-rays. So these can severely impact their survivability. we think that it is linked to ocean health, and marine leeches help to spread it. So just like the herpes virus in humans, if your body is compromised, you're feeling sick, then you might have an outbreak. Same thing for these turtles. So we think that we see this virus when resources are not as prevalent and they're struggling. So in this bottom photo, that whole plastron is covered in marine leech eggs. So definitely something we see very commonly, and there's some adults mixed in. And so that's something we see a lot with these FP turtles, is that marine leeches are commonly found on them. Luckily, it's not transmissible to humans, but it does affect all species of sea turtles. But we find it most commonly in green sea turtles, although we are starting to see it more in other species. This virus is relatively new, and we still have a lot to learn about it. We only saw it first appear in Texas in 2010, so still, like I said, lots to learn about it. How do we treat it? So the herpes virus, just like humans, is forever. So we cannot cure it, but we can try to help these turtles to survive a little better. So we use a CO2 laser, which cauterizes and cuts off these tumors at the same time. And so that speeds up the healing process, definitely reduces blood loss, and we usually follow up with antibiotics. A lot of times these turtles, they come in with FP and we have to treat that, but they've already been out there in the world for a while, and they come in debilitated, sometimes entangled, or with boat strike injuries because they've been floating at the surface. So a lot of times there's more than one thing going on, and we have to get them healthy enough to sustain the surgery. One thing we're also seeing, some good news in the world of FP and treatment, is that there is regression of the virus. So a lot of times, which, let's look at this next photo. A lot of times we'll see these tumors that are, let's see, more papillary. They look like cauliflower. Those are newer tumors. And then there's smoother tumors that are starting to regress. Those smoother tumors, are older, and they will start to get smaller, which is pretty cool. So that's something that we're seeing in recent years, and we're learning more about. All right, looking at the numbers, over the years, we've dealt with just over 550 FP turtles, but like I said, the first one was only found in Texas in 2010. So, very small numbers. 2018 can be kind of misleading because that was our huge cold sun year. And one thing about cold stunning is you kind of get a picture of what's happening with the whole population, because everybody's affected by cold stunning. But for us, we were one of the only facilities accepting FP turtles. So that number may be slightly higher. However, I have seen data that suggests that it was similar. It was 40% of all of the turtles that were found had FP, around 40%. So it could be that is accurate. So with that regression, we're hoping that this virus is starting to get lessened, and maybe we'll start seeing less of it in our area. So Florida, who they saw kind of the first cases, and well, Hawaii saw the first cases, then Florida, but in the Gulf of Mexico, Florida saw the first cases, and they are starting to see a downward trend. So we're hoping that Texas, who's behind them a little bit, will start to see that trend as well. So So something we've always seen, but recently became a really big issue was jetty trap turtles. So over the years, we've dealt with 370 jetty trap turtles, but a big portion of that was found in 2019 with 120 of them. So let's go, remember back to 2019's huge spike in stranding and try to start figuring out why that happened. So 2019 was a huge year for recruitment to our area. So once these turtles hatch, they had a big hatch year, then they go to sargassum mats. They live there for about a year. Pelagic lifestyle, just floating with the currents, and then after that they swim to the nearshore waters and they come visit us. So we had this huge recruitment pulse of turtles in 2019, and that created this opportunity for lots of strandings. We also had a year of lots of high tides and strong wind and surf, and so that created a lot of jetty trap turtles. But we're still seeing jetty trap turtles in 2020, even with the lower numbers, and a big part of that is because 2020 was a pretty active hurricane year, if you guys remember, and so we had a lot of turtles getting trapped in the jetties during Tropical Storm Beta and all of those hurricanes and storms out in the Gulf. All right. For you in the back, maybe you didn't notice the turtle. That's one of the challenging parts, is finding them. So how do we treat it? So if you find a turtle in the wild that's stuck in the jetties, definitely give us a call. And I'm going to show you guys the stranding number a little bit later, because we see a lot going on with these turtles. They're not just healthy and pushed into the rocks. They get kind of beat up by those jetty rocks. They'll have abrasions, they'll be dehydrated. There's a lot of stress related injuries and sometimes broken bones. And you can see that in this photo with the broken humeral bone there. So a lot of them are easy fixes. They maybe need a little bit of fluids and they're back on their way, but others spend a little bit more time at the ARC. So we help to help rehab these turtles in much the same way as a lot of the other techniques: x-rays, honey for all of those abrasions, bandages, debridement, cold laser, antibiotics, fluids. Everybody gets fluids. Everybody needs fluids. All right, the best part of the job is releasing these turtles. So everyone loves this part, and I know I do. We haven't been able to do any public releases since COVID-19, but I sure do love doing those public releases and seeing all those kids cheering these turtles on back into the water. And you know, turtle releases are still pretty emotional for me. You know, watching them swim away, it never gets old. So the ARC has released more sea turtles than any other rehab facility in the United States, with over 3,500 turtles released from our facility. And you can see that cold stuns, we've been pretty successful at getting most of those guys out. It's a easier, quicker process for sure, and we've been pretty successful at that. High chance of release. Boat strikes, much lower chance. Like I said, they have pretty extensive, severe injuries, and that really does inhibit them being released back. So, but some other things we do, we have a oiled wildlife facility. So with the increase of industrialization, this may be something that is more used, more utilized. but we're here and we're there to help if that becomes a need. And so all of our staff are trained in Wildlife Rehab, and we have the facility to be able to do that. So, all right, like I said before, if you find a turtle and it's nesting, great. If it's injured, if it's dead, give us a call, 1-866-TURTLE-5. That number works along the whole Texas coast. So you'll get to a automated service, and it'll have numbers depending on where you are. I think for our area, it's number 4, and you'll get my cell phone. So, you know, we'll be there to help as soon as possible. If you find an injured bird, because remember, in one of the first slides, I said we not only work with sea turtles, but also marine birds and raptors. I just threw up the ARC number there too. So get those numbers, put them in your phone. All right, some conclusions. The ARC is definitely getting many more intakes than in previous years. And a lot of those are because of the green sea turtle numbers increasing. And we've seen that time and time again for those years. So coal sun turtles, usually found alive, high release rate, also heavily dependent on green sea turtle numbers. Entanglements are increasing, unfortunately. Boat strikes are also kind of increasing too. We saw that in 2020 when our numbers were, you know, much lower than 2019, but we still saw almost just as much boat strikes as we did in 2019. So definitely something we're going to keep a close eye on. They're usually found dead, unfortunately, and they have a pretty low release rate. Jetty trap turtles, we're finding large pulse in 2019, but it's still something that's happening, and it's probably tied to those recruitment pulses, but also to wind, waves, tides, high tides, all of that can, and storms in the Gulf can bring about more jetty trap turtles. Some folks to say thank you to. Friends of the ARC for all of their financial support, Dr. Paula Baker and the Island Animal Clinic staff that always help for our veterinary needs, and Dr. Shana Whitaker, Padre Island National Seashore, Texas Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Keep Aransas County Beautiful. They're a wonderful organization that helps us transport turtles that we find in Aransas County. That really is amazing. And we work closely with other rehab facilities in the area, Texas State Aquarium, Texas Sea Life Center, and Sea Turtle Inc. It's important to collaborate. Also, San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge, Mustang Island State Park, the city of Port A is awesome. They help us bury a lot of our turtles. And then ARC volunteers and staff. I've always said we couldn't do it without the volunteers. Well, with COVID, we've definitely put that to the test, and it has been very, very challenging. Our staff is extremely dedicated, lots of long nights and no complaints. And the university and Mission Aransas, a lot of their employees and staff will help out in times of need, which is amazing. So, all right. Do we have any questions?
Alicia, thank you so much. That was amazing. And to our participants, if you have a question for Alicia, we ask that you type it into the chat box and we will feed her your question. And in the meantime, so we'd like to ask you to type your questions into the chat box and we will feed those questions to Alicia. And in the meantime, I'd like to point out to everyone that our next 4 speakers will be part of the College of Natural Sciences, University of Texas Science Fest. And I have put the website in the chat box. You can go and you can search for presenters, and just by marine science or physics or whatever your area of interest is. And we will have many more really great presentations for you. Does anyone have any questions for Alicia? Alicia, so we have one. Do turtles eat man-of-war jellyfish? And if so, which ones?
So turtles do like jellyfish, especially the leatherback. Leatherbacks love jellyfish. They predominantly eat jellyfish. And remember, those leatherbacks were the 1,000-pound turtles. So it's pretty amazing to think about these turtles that are so large, like the size of a small car, and they're sustained only on jellyfish, which is kind of cool.
You're getting
Good
lots of questions. What a great job, Alicia. Thank you. And we have a question. What inspired you to work in the field of animal rehabilitation?
So I grew up in southern Louisiana, and you know, my father was really involved in the outdoors, and I would tag along, and I loved being out there. And we had this creek behind our house, and I'd find freshwater turtles in the creek, and I would check off which species I found. I also did a mark recapture study. I think I was like 10 years old, where I was marking my turtles with fingernail polish and releasing them, and then finding where they went in the creek, you know, behind my neighbors' houses. So I've always just loved being outside and enamored by turtles.
So we have another question. Could public awareness have caused an increase in the numbers that you're seeing?
Absolutely.
You're doing such a great job of outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has a huge part in it, because a lot of our turtles are called in by the public. We do have surveys that we conduct on the beaches. So during nesting season, we have a beach patroller every single day. And then in non-nesting season, then we patrol once a week. So we are definitely out there looking during those times where we think there might be an increase in cold stunning. We're out there. Also for jetty trap turtles. I know Nicole, who's on here, has done quite a few jetty surveys looking for turtles trapped in the jetties. So we definitely do some surveys, but predominantly the public call in the turtles, and we're very thankful for that.
So someone asked, do you have sustainable funding, or is the rescue strapped for funds?
Well, we do heavily rely on donations, but we also have some grants that we apply to, and so it is it's always challenging, but we find a way, you know.
Oh, here's a great question. Are there things that the public can do while they can't be at the Ark during the pandemic to help the Ark?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's safe to be outdoors and away from folks, you know, socially distanced. So if you're out there on the beach or you're on the jetty and you see a turtle, then definitely give us a call. So you can also help with marine debris cleanups. So we have a couple coming up. They're on our Facebook page, some dates. And so, yeah, get out there and help clean up your area. Be a good steward of the environment. That helps turtles, and it helps all marine wildlife. So that's a great way to get involved during the pandemic. Thank you for having me, and thank you for tuning in.